So how important is buyer's agency when shopping for a new house? It's more important than you think. But what the heck is buyer's agency? So let's talk about buyer's agency and how we help you through the process of buying a new home. Before we do that, I want to touch base on something that may affect buyer's agency to some degree in the future. Several years ago, there was a class action lawsuit that was filed against the National Association of Realtors by a personal injury attorney. There's a shocker. He alleged that real estate agents were colluding behind the scenes to keep commissions high so that home prices would remain high. Now, keep in mind that this is a guy that by industry standards charges 35%. But anyway, after 4 years, the association has just agreed to settle that suit for $418 million. No admission of wrongdoing. They just wanted it to be over. So the question is, who wins? The attorneys estimated to get about $135 million. And the home sellers, or the victims that he claims to represent, may receive about $20 should they decide to file a claim. So as a result, there's some things that are going to change and come out of this settlement that will certainly affect buyer's agency. One, the settlement allows for commissions to be negotiated freely between buyers, sellers, real estate agents. That's nothing new in North Carolina. It's always been done that way. Two is cooperative compensation, and that's where the seller pays the buyer's agency commission. That's still allowed. It's always been allowed, but the details can no longer be shown online or on MLS. So basically what that means is that buyer's agents will no longer know how much they're getting paid, even though they may have been working with their client shopping for homes for months or even years in some cases. Now let's discuss how real estate agents generally get paid, or historically how they've gotten paid. When selling a home, real estate fees generally range between 5 to 6%. And contrary to what the media would have you believe, it's always been that way. It's always been negotiable. The fees are generally negotiated between the seller and the listing agent. And to give you a breakdown of how those fees are typically allocated, I'm going to use 6% as an example. Let's say that the seller's agent is charging 6% to their buyer. The listing firm or the seller agent is going to charge 6% in this example. The listing firm's going to allocate a portion of that money towards buyer's agency compensation. Let's just say it's 3%. It's usually split 50-50. They know that buyer's agents aren't going to show up. They're not going to bring their clients if they're not getting paid. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. Out of the 3%, you have your brokerage fees to pay. You have advertising cost, legal cost, branding cost, transportation cost, support staff, office space cost, health insurance, federal, state taxes. Everything that's left over after all of that stuff is what you would consider an agent's profit. So all broken down, the average salary for a real estate agent in North Carolina is somewhere between $50,000 to $60,000 per year. And obviously, successful agents can certainly make more if they're willing to put the work in. Now let's discuss specifically what a buyer's agent should be doing to earn that fee. On the surface, it would seem like a buyer's agent's job is simply to find a home that suits the needs of the buyer, submit an offer, and get paid when that house closes. And one might say, I don't need anyone to help me find a house. And that would be 100% true. In fact, more often than not, my buyers are actually sharing homes with me that they find online, because they know what they like better than I do anyway. And then we go see the houses and decide if it's the right fit. And it's actually a much more efficient process doing it that way. That being said, my job is not as much about finding you the right home as it is about mitigating your risks and protecting you through the entire process of buying it. Because most people simply don't know what they don't know, and buying a home can be very, very complicated. Most people, it's the largest purchase they're ever going to make in a lifetime, and there's plenty of opportunities to screw it up. It's not like buying a car. Negotiating the price down $10,000 or $20,000 doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a good deal. Most buyers simply, they don't have the tools at their disposal or the knowledge to determine whether or not the value of that house is what it is, what they're asking. And I can promise you that trusting Zillow is not a sound strategy when it comes to doing that. So the first mistake an unrepresented buyer is generally going to do is they're going to find the home online, then they're going to call the listing agent and start asking questions. And it's important to keep in mind that the listing agent is obligated to their client, the seller, not you as the buyer. Their job is to get their client as much money as possible and put you in a position most likely that would make it very, very difficult for you to back out without at least experiencing some pain. So think of yourself, it might be a dumb analogy, but think of yourself like a deer. You are determined to get across this river on your own. The only problem is that there's a 10-foot alligator that lives in the river. So as soon as you step into the water, you're on his turf. You might make it across, you might not. Regardless, would it have made more sense to use an experienced guide or just swim as hard as you could to just, see what happens? My job is to stand between you and that alligator. My job is to guide you through the river with as little pain and little expense as possible to get you to the other side. Now, should you decide to do it on your own, here's some things that you're probably going to be faced with. How much due diligence money should you offer? Are you going to rely on what the listing agent suggests? And keep in mind, remember, his loyalty lies with the seller, not with you. Do you know what due diligence money even is? What is it? And do you get that money back if things fall apart? How much earnest money should you offer? Do you get that back if things fall apart? What's the difference between earnest money and due diligence money? Because it's different in different states, and most people from New York have never even heard of the concept. It's been my experience. So what's the best strategy to use when it comes to due diligence and earnest money to increase your odds of having your offer accepted in the first place without overexposing yourself? What legal timelines can come into play? Who do you use for inspections? How long do you have to get the inspections done? Who are the good inspectors? Who are the bad inspectors? That's very important. What about pest inspections or radon inspections, well inspections, septic, pool inspections? How much do those cost, and do you really need those, or do you need certain ones more so than others? What if you find things wrong with the house? Who do you call to get estimates to fix the house, and how long do you have to do it? Should that involve a general contractor or just a handyman? Again, how long do you have to get those things done? What's your timelines? Is the seller going to pay for those repairs? What are your options if they say no? What are you going to do then? What happens if the house doesn't doesn't appraise? What happens, and it happens a lot, what if both parties get aggravated with each other and things come to a stalemate and the closing's only a couple days away? I mean, the list goes on, it goes on and goes on. That's just scratching the surface. So buying a home is a huge, huge financial decision, and you can spend a lot of money before the home is even yours. There can be long-term consequences, if you make mistakes. My job is to mitigate those mistakes. Emotions are heightened. That's the number one thing. You have to be very careful not to let emotions guide you, because especially when it's two spouses shopping and trying to do all this, we as humans, we tend to buy on emotion and then we justify it with logic. When I represent buyers, I never let them buy on emotion. And because I'm a former home builder, I'm also able to see things that other agents might overlook when shopping for homes. And what that allows us to do is it prevents us from wasting a lot of money on inspections, if there's red flags that another agent or you as the buyer may have overlooked when looking. So deciding to do this or go it alone versus using a huge or a solid real estate agent it's very important. So for a moment, let's go back to the very beginning and revisit that NAR settlement that I was telling you about. If anything, I believe this settlement has hurt both buyers and sellers far more than it's helped them. From a seller's perspective, some less than virtuous real estate agents may use that settlement to get your listing by telling you that you no longer have to, or you're no longer required to pay a buyer's agency commission. And he is 100% accurate. That is 100% true. It's always been true. They'll make you think, though, however, with this settlement, that they're only going to list your house at 2.5% to 3% and do you a big favor. The problem with that is no one, including real estate agents, are willing to work for free. Buyers, if my buyer isn't getting paid, or if a buyer's agent's not getting paid, it's likely going to be very difficult for you to find a suitable buyer for that house. So I strongly suggest you take into consideration the idea of including buyer's agency fees when discussing that with your agent. Most buyers, they're not going to expect their agent to work for free either, but at the same time, they don't generally have the upfront money to pay their real estate agent when they're faced with putting 20% down on buying your home. So if you have a listing agent that's suggesting this, I might suggest finding someone with a little more professionalism. The entire premise of this lawsuit was to, in theory, reduce home prices, but I'm willing to bet that that agent suggesting you not offer compensation to the buyer side is not also advising you to reduce the asking price of your home by 3%, are they? So just think about that when choosing a right agent. Choosing the right agent is just as critical as choosing the right home. So when you're ready to buy, or sell a home for that matter, make sure that you choose wisely. Real estate is challenging, it's difficult, it's a very difficult business, and not everyone is suitable for the job. So what do I charge for buyer's agency? My fee for buyer's agency generally is 3% of the sale of the home that we're purchasing. In most cases, the fee is already factored in, as we discussed earlier, by the listing agent. It's negotiated when the home is listed. In the event that that listing agent's only offering, let's say, 2 or 2.5%, then the difference not covered by the seller side would be offered at the time of closing on the settlement statement and paid to me. The difference is, if the seller side is not offering any commission whatsoever based on poor advice from their listing agent, then the buyers would be responsible for covering the entire buyer's agency fee at closing. But this doesn't happen very often. Now, as I've said before, everything's negotiable, so this is certainly a conversation that we can have before beginning the process. So I'll leave you with this analogy. Let's say that you want to build a deck and you need a new saw. There's plenty of options out there. You go to Home Depot, you could buy a Black & Decker, or you can buy a Milwaukee. Both on the box say that they do exactly what you need them to do. However, when the job gets tough, are you going to be happier with a saw that tends to cut crooked, is likely to fall apart halfway through the process, you need to replace it? Or are you going to be happier with the one that cuts straight every single time and never, ever, ever breaks? So just think about that. So when the time comes and you're ready to buy a house, I'm here for you. Call me, text me, email me. Can't wait to start the process with you.